79, the A320 going to Phoenix, Arizona.
Hi, 081 Heavy on Kilo, hold charge Alpha.
Who's a Kilo Thai? Who is that?
Hi, 081 Heavy.
Cam 8081 Heavy, left on Alpha, short of Echo. 808 Bravo Lima, you didn't follow... 808 Bravo Lima?
808 Bravo Lima, you told us to follow the Embraer.
You follow the Embraer? JetBlue 1069?
Hi, and welcome to MzeroA's video podcast, episode number 14, The Effects of CG. I'm your host, Jason Schappert. CG, or center of gravity, is one of the toughest subjects for students to grasp. Today, we're going to talk about how CG position affects stall speed, cruise speed, and aircraft stability. Let's watch the video. Before we start, let's go over some basic definitions for this lesson. The first definition is our CG, or our center of gravity. This is the longitudinal and lateral point in which an aircraft is stable, also known as the static balance point, where everything balances. Our second definition is located on the wing, and that is known as the center of pressure. That is the point along the chord where the distributed lift of the entire wing is effectively concentrated. Let's go ahead and take a look at how CG affects stability. In aft, CG is less stable. The reason that it's less stable is because the center of gravity is closer to the center of pressure. This causes longitudinal instability, which makes our airplane go up and down. A forward CG, we can then assume, is the exact opposite. A forward CG is more stable because the center of gravity is further from the center of pressure. This increases longitudinal stability. Now, how does this affect our stall recovery? An aft CG is difficult to recover from a stall or a spin. This is because in a stall or a spin, we primarily use our rudder to help recover. And there's a shorter arm versus the forward CG. Look at the difference in the lengths of arm and the leverage you would get using that rudder to recover. Let's look at another example that might make it a little bit clearer and compare it to this wrench. When we use a wrench, we always use the back end of the handle. That way we can get the most leverage to open up the bolt. This is how our forward CG looks. It's longer, it's more leverage. We wouldn't use the shorter end of our wrench like our aft CG because there's less leverage, making it less effective. And that's how our rudder works in relation to center of gravity and stall recovery. So how does our CG affect our cruise speed? Well, an aft CG actually results in a higher cruise speed because there is less tail downforce, allowing there to be less drag and our airplane to be more effective. So, as you begin to notice the pattern, what happens to an aft must be the opposite to the forward. So a forward CG is actually a slower cruise speed. This is because there's more tail downforce to combat, which allows higher amounts of drag and less airplane efficiency. So now the big one. And this is going to take a second to explain, so feel free to watch this more than once. How CG affects our stall speed is one of the toughest things for students to understand. Remember, an aft CG equals a lower stall speed. That's the easy part to remember. Let's get into a little more detail. A forward CG obviously would have a higher stall speed because a forward CG requires more downforce on the tail. However, this downforce must be countered by an increase in lift on the main wing. Otherwise, the weight from the aircraft plus the downforce would greatly exceed the lift. So at a given airspeed, we would reach that critical angle of attack. So, for example, if we normally cruise at 90 knots, we're having to fly at a higher angle of attack still maintaining that 90 knots, but we're already closer to that critical angle of attack even though we're doing 90 knots. Let's explain that a little bit differently here and use something we're all familiar with, a seesaw, or scientifically called a fulcrum. And let's relate this to our airplane. Our pivot point we can relate to as our center of gravity. That green arrow where it says effort, let's scratch that out and let's put lift. The red arrow, let's get rid of load and let's put tail downforce. Now when we superimpose our aircraft over that, you can see what a forward CG does. Remember that long arm? Look at where that pivot point is in relation to the tail downforce. The tail downforce has a clear advantage. On top of having weight on its side, you have to generate a whole lot of lift, which means you really have to increase that angle of attack, bringing you closer to that critical angle attack. Now the thing is, you're cruising, so you're already going faster. You're going that 90 knots. You're going that 100 knots. So you're doing that though at a higher angle of attack as to maintain altitude, which thus puts you closer to that critical angle of attack. To help you remember this, I made up a How CG Affects Aircraft Performance note card for you. Something you can print out, put it on your flight manual, keep it in your flight bag, but it covers everything we talked about today. It'll be a great help for any check ride because believe it or not, this stuff comes up on the check ride, so be ready for it. And remember, a good pilot is always learning. See ya.
You're on Bravo, you're short of Victor Alpha, you're Beam the Iberian.
The Beam Alitalia on the left there.
Beam Alitalia. Alright, just hang on. JetBlue 179?
Yes, sir. We're number 2 holding short of Victor Alpha on Bravo.
Hey, who's the first JetBlue on Bravo short of Victor Alpha?
35.
You're an outbound?
Yep.
Hey, you guys should come up here one day. JetBlue 35, need you to pull it right up there and hold short of Victor for me.